I woke up at midnight to the sound of my doorbell ringing. I went down to the living room. I opened the door for my mother that was outside. She was smiling and still wearing her work clothes. I received her with a long and tight hug. "Coming home at these hours?" I asked, holding her face. She smiled and said, "Of course. What time did you want me to arrive?" she said sarcastically. She went into the kitchen and started preparing a late dinner. She asked me to join her. She didn't let me sleep for a long time. We talked about several subjects, such as home, life, dreams, plans for the future, and even the end of the year. I looked at the clock on the wall that showed 4:30 in the morning. I decided to go to my room because my eyes were already heavily tired. My mother followed me to my bed. She kissed me and said how much she loved me. I retributed, also doing the same thing. I saw her leaving the room before closing the door behind her. I finally slept. At 6 a.m., I woke up to my cell phone ringing. The number was unknown. "Hello? Does this number belong to Mr. Marty Sullivan?" asked a male voice. "Yes, it's him," I replied. "Hello, Mr. Sullivan. I'm Officer Marcus from the Massachusetts Department of Security." Before the man continued, I jumped out of bed and sat on one of the edges. "Did something happen?" I asked apprehensively. "Mr. Sullivan, we are contacting you to report that there was an accident on Highway 98. "Accident?" "Your mother's car, Mrs. Angela, was involved." Everything muted around. "We're sorry for your loss." I ran towards my mother's room, ignoring the police officer who was still talking on the phone. The room was exactly as she had left the morning before, when she left for work, organized, clean, and empty. English is not my first language, so please bear with me. So years back when I was 10 years old, and I am 19 now, my dad and I live in a studio space in a condo. There was this one time that, before I went to sleep, I asked my dad what time will he be able to get to home. We sleep beside each other and I can really sleep well without him beside me. He said that he won't be able to come home that night because of heavy workload, but he will be able to eat lunch with me the day after. So I did my usual routine. I turned on the light and turned on the TV, then went to sleep. This was my way of sleeping alone since I was a pussy back then. I need loud sounds and bright lights. I woke up at around 3 a.m. and the lights and TV were off. I was scared shitless. But then I felt my dad beside me, so everything was okay. I hugged him tight and went back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up without my dad beside me, so I assumed he got off to work. So I called him to ask if he had breakfast and all that, and what time did he went to work. He then was puzzled and said that he wasn't able to come home and he's still in his office. Then it hit me. The lights and TV were still on the whole time. Then, who the hell slept beside me? I woke up around 2 or 3 a.m. I was so tired I couldn't even remember the time. I rolled over onto my back to check if my dog was at the feet of my bed. What I saw instead was a tall black figure walking down the hall. It was too tall to be my dad. At first, I thought it was sleep paralysis, but I was able to move and I wasn't dreaming. After about 10 minutes, I heard the creaking of the floorboards coming down the hall. Before I could cover myself up with a blanket, I saw its hand on my doorframe. It had long, sharp fingernails. Its head slowly poked out behind the door. It had long, dark hair, which I didn't see before. I couldn't see any eyes, but I knew it was staring dead at me. I couldn't take my eyes off the faceless creature. It started to tap its finger on my doorframe. It has only been minutes, but it felt like an hour. I could hear the tick, tick, ticking of the grandfather clock out in the hallway. It stopped tapping its fingers. It revealed its whole body by standing in the doorway. My door was 6 feet, so its head was just cut off by the door. All of a sudden, I could hear the static noise coming from the living room TV. The volume was at least at 100. I heard my dad get out of bed and open his bedroom door, which was across from mine. The tall figure disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. I got up and followed my dad, covering my ears. When we came into the living room, all the pictures of my mom, who passed away a few years back, had been on the floor and been shattered. My dad went to shut the TV off. I picked up one of the photos. It was a family picture from 2017. It had me, my mom, my oldest sister who was in college now, and my dad. Under the broken glass, my mother's face had been scribbled out in red pen. My dad couldn't turn off the TV, so he had to unplug it. He came over to see what I was looking at. We shared a confused glance and went to bed so we could pick up all the glass tomorrow. I couldn't sleep that night. I don't think my dad did either. All I could picture was the creepy, tall figure in my doorway. And why did he smash and scribble all the pictures with my mom in them? I managed to get a wink of sleep when the blasting sound of my alarm clock made me flinch. I got up to examine the mess of broken glass and pictures on the floor. What we both failed to realize was that sitting on the couch was a note. I couldn't remember if it was there last night. I went over, avoiding the broken glass, picking up the notes and sat on the couch. All the note read was, "I hope you enjoyed my visit," written in red ink. This story did not occur to me, but a woman who's a good friend of mine. This happened roughly 10 years ago. I'll write this from her perspective. It was about 2:30 a.m. I'd been on my way home from the bar with a friend, and we stopped at the 7-Eleven. The town was just on the outskirts of the city of Pittsburgh, an urban area called Bellevue. It was cold, maybe January or February, and few vehicles were out on the road. As my friend pumped gas, I went inside to pee. There was a scruffy, thin, very wrinkly man in a long-sleeved plaid shirt, stained and ripped jeans, wearing a baseball cap that said Marlboro on it. He was leaning against the counter, talking to the cashier, a younger guy I was acquainted with, who was always there late at night. I remember when I glanced at him, he nodded back in affirmative. Only, what struck me was the worried or anxious look in his eyes. The tall, older man also turned to look at me and smiled just as I passed. He was missing all of his teeth. Something was just off about him. The women's bathroom had 2 stalls in it. I placed toilet paper over the seat and sat down. Almost immediately, the door opened and someone walked in. Probably my friend Megan. I could only see a silver of the shoes, which stopped in front of my stall on the way in, turned and moved towards the mirror, and then turned once more, before going to the stall next to me. I don't think much of it, that is, until I hear the seat bang against the back of the toilet, and the loud, audible, cascading sound of urine pouring into the toilet. I check under the enclosure. Heavy turned boots, the scent of cigarette smoke circumventing in the room, and the stench of dried sweat. It was a man urinating. What the fuck? Unfortunately, as the sound stopped and the person walked out of the next stall, I was still in the middle of urinating. I watched as the shoes crept to the mirror, no running water, then watched as they moved towards me and became firmly planted right in front of my door. Jesus Christ! I silently screamed in my mind. Suddenly, the door began jiggling, at which point I called my friend. Hey, I'm in the ladies' room. Tell Matt to come in here. I need help. There was nobody named Matt. It was only my cover. The jiggling stopped, and I heard an eerie chuckle, followed by, in a deep, raspy baritone voice, "You're a smart girl." The man walked out of the bathroom. I called the number to the store and asked the cashier if the man had left. "Yeah, he just walked out. Is something wrong?" "No," I replied. "But can you walk me out?" He did. As I was leaving, the cashier and I gave each other a look, an acknowledgement that he gets it now. I told my friend about him and what happened. On our way out, we turned to go up a hill when we came to a stop sign. It was very dark. Out of nowhere, that exact same man crossed the street in front of our car, flashed us both a frightening grin and wave, before crossing into a dark alley. I suppose I could have called police, but what cause did I have, or proof, that this man was dangerous? Creepy, sure, but that's it. All I can think about is how lucky I was, And sometimes I obsessively ponder if any other girl had become his victim. Aside from what he did, the memory of the way he smelled coupled with not washing his hands afterwards to this day infuses me with a deep sense of dread and discomfort. I don't go into that store anymore, or any, for that matter. I'll just hold it until I get home. This story may not sound as scary as many others, but it scared me for some time, though I have gotten over it in the last couple of months. When this happened, I was 14 years old, so that for me makes this story even weirder. After the lockdown started, I started taking daily walks down to my local harbor, and since I live in a relatively safe area in Denmark, I was never worried. So one day, I was walking down a side road when I saw a man walking directly towards me. I tried to look down at the ground and look away as he seemed to be drunk, and I'm not good at talking to strangers. But he walked right up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Alarms were already beaming in my head, but I didn't run or try to remove his hand. Already then, I was gripped by fear, and it wasn't that he was physically intimidating. A small old man in construction worker's clothes and a beer can in his other hand. Seeing as I'm quite tall and in good shape, I would easily be able to get away from him, but I couldn't. He stared into my eyes and talked in slurred English with a heavy northern accent. He was barely comprehensible until he asked me a question. "Are you going out to meet some friends?" That is something you never want to hear from a strange man as a child. And so, I was fully ready to run. I quietly answered, "No." And he simply smiled at me and said, "Okay," and lifted his hand from my shoulder. He began to walk away, but then he turned back to me and, losing every trace of an accent or drunkenness, in perfect Danish, "Have a good day. May the wind be with you." We both walked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling of absolute dread I felt being in his presence. He didn't seem human. It felt cold. Hi, I've always wanted to share this story because it gives me the hacking chills every time I think about it. I have few other ones, but this one spooks me the most. I lived with my grandparents in Mexico when I was around 5 or 6 years old in their two-story house. There was another house my great aunt had bought across the street, about 4 houses down from ours, that we were helping renovate. The sidewalks in our specific area reach up to hip length when standing on the street to avoid flooding inside the house when it rains. One day my mom and brother went to the house to renovate, while I stayed with my grandparents. When it suddenly started raining heavily, the streets flooded and the water ran as fast as a river, so they got stuck across the street. While my grandparents and I sat at the doorway watching the rain fall. Directly across from our house lived 3 girls with their mother. They were playing upstairs in their home when suddenly All three of them let out the most blood-chilling scream any of us had ever heard. My brother heard them from the other house a few doors down, and my grandpa started to get worried as they were all girls living alone. He thought that something bad had happened, but we weren't able to check up on them as the flooded street could easily drag anyone away. Once the streets cleared up enough to get across, my brother and grandpa went to see if they were okay. When they came back, they said that everything was fine and the girls were just playing. After that, my brother refused to enter the bedroom. We'd sleep in upstairs that had a direct view of where the girls were playing in their home. It bothered me so much because that room always gave me the creeps, so I'd had him accompany me, but he still refused. Later on, he confessed that the girls had seen an old woman with sunken eyes and pale skin, wearing a black veil over her face, with the little girl next to her were standing in our window watching them. At first they had thought it was my grandma and I, but they soon realized we had been sitting downstairs in the doorway. My grandpa told my brother not to say anything so as to not scare me. 14 years later, I still get chills thinking I had slept in that room for so long. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, afraid I'd see them, but I never did. Okay, so when I was 12, it was summertime. I remember that because it was hotter than the hottest. Anyway, I was changing to go to a friend's house at around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I just had put my pants on when I noticed something in the reflection of my tube TV. In the reflection, at the angle I was at, I could see my closet. In the threshold of my closet, there was a girl. Maybe around my age at the time, like 11 or 10. She was wearing a tattered white dress, and her skin looked decayed and severely burned. I wasn't afraid, just confused, because when I looked over to my closet, she wasn't there. I looked back at the reflection, and she was there, just standing and staring at me. I looked back and forth for a good 2 or 3 minutes before she disappeared from the reflection. Remember when I said it was summer and it was very hot? My room at the time normally ran warm because of the windows. When I went to where she was supposed to be, it was icy cold. Yes, that's a real thing. I remember it like it just happened. That was 13 years ago. I wandered down an alley one night in Brooklyn. I was in New York City for 5 days, and I left my Airbnb for just a little to walk around and find a convenience store to buy chew. I wandered down an alley. I passed through and came to a store on the other end. I made my purchase and began walking home, entering the alley once more. It was dark and cold, and my extremities were numbing. In the alley was a dumpster. I remember thinking, fuck, it's freezing tonight. I cocked my head to the side to spit into the dumpster before hearing a high-pitched squeal and the rustling of a bag inside. I halted, thinking it was a cat. Again, a muffled whining. It was incredibly dark, so I flashed my phone light into the dumpster. Reluctantly, hoping it wasn't a schizophrenic homeless man with a knife. A large black rat covered stinking dumpster. My phone light revealed the black garbage bag tied tightly at the top. I poked it, then it moved. And it began shrieking. I reached in with trepidation, careful not to get bit by whatever animal was cruelly tied in that bag. But the idea of suffocation of an innocent creature kills me. I grasped a handful of the bag with both hands, and it ripped open. It was a baby, covered in black soot and oily grime. Its skin was so cold, it almost burned my fingers like an ice cube. Limbs solid as a rock. Its cries raspy, breathing labored. I don't know how it was still alive. I called 911 as I pulled it out and wrapped it in my coat. Please come quick, or one of us is going to freeze, I urged the operator. I told them the convenience store I was in, which I went back to, and put the cashier on the phone to explain the location, since I didn't know where the hell I was. I gave the baby to EMTs, who wrapped it up, then they drove off. I never found out what happened to the baby, if the parents were arrested, or if it lived. But to have something which only occurs in nightmares happen to me, well, is something I wish I'd wake up from. It was the bleakest moment of my life. The murderer had been in that alley, maybe only minutes before me. The one thing I truly can't ever forget is the way the baby smelled. I can't even describe it. It was pungent, not from the garbage in the dumpster, but purely from neglect. When I touched it, I felt the grime stick to my fingers. So awful. I grew up in a relatively new suburb, yet it has an urban legend that goes around. A legend that kids whisper to each other in the schoolyard. I know because I was the one that first spoke about it. About him. The man on the stairs. When I was little, I would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night. I was afraid of the dark, but my mother told me to just close my eyes and wait for sleep to come. So every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I would lay down in bed with my eyes closed and wait. Then is when I would hear it, the stairs, creaking, as if someone heavy was standing on them and was moving up. I had lived in that house since I was 1 year old. I knew the sound of that staircase like the sound of my own voice. I knew that the staircase had 12 steps, and as I heard the creaking of the stairs, I would count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I knew that it wasn't my mom or my dad. They would always leave the light of the hallway on before they went to bed. 6, 7, 8, 9. And the toilet was in my bathroom beside my room. 10, 11. And there it would stop, always at 11. I would hold in my breath, afraid that he or whatever it was that was standing on my stairs would hear. But that final step never came. They seemed to just stand there, waiting and waiting. I am a very imaginative person, and I knew that from a very young age. I knew very well how to scare myself. So I asked my sister, who is almost 2 years older than me, whether she had heard it too, ever. She is much more level-headed and liked to mock me for my overactive imagination. So I expected her to laugh at me for this, but she didn't. She just looked at me with big eyes and asked, "You hear it too?" I was in middle school and had many friends who lived near me. One time, during lunch break, I gathered about 8 of my friends around me and asked the same thing. Asked whether they had ever heard footsteps on their stairs at night. And all who lived but a couple of streets away from my house said yes. Yes, they had heard. They had heard the footsteps on the stairs. The footsteps that came and then stopped. The man on the stairs, who always stood on the stairs, waiting, never reaching the top. Years passed and I forgot about it. The sound at night must have stopped, or I just didn't wake up at night anymore. I don't remember. A decade passed without me giving another thought to the man on the stairs. I still live in the same street as before, and I became a babysitter for one of the houses in the street. 2 boys, one 7 years old and the other 5. One night, I was tucking the 5 years old in his bed when he asked me to keep the light on in his room. But I asked him, "Is the light in the hallway not enough?" "No," he said. He was afraid of darkness, because in the darkness, there was someone on the stairs. He said, "There's always a man on the stairs, waiting." Just some background to the story. I was 16 years old and lived in an old 2-story house in the Netherlands, located near the forest in Farmer's Village. Now to the story. I have always been sensitive to things that happened around me. I never felt safe in my own house. As a kid, I would never play in my own room because I was too scared to be alone upstairs, and if I would go to sleep, I would sneak downstairs until my parents would go to sleep so I wouldn't have to be alone. Throughout the years, I think I have gotten used to the feeling that somebody is watching me in my own room. Seeing shadows, hearing voices, or even feeling something hitting my head. Sometimes, I would confront my parents about this, and they would tell me that the house is old and that people have died in the house, and it might be their spirits. Fast forward to that night, it was a normal night for me. I went to bed and thought nothing of it, until I woke up in pure panic in the middle of the night. This is where it gets weird. I remember getting up out of my bed, but I was not in control of my own body. The closest thing I can describe it is as if like you're half awake but still in that sleep state. There was a voice in my dream that told me that I have to leave.
Get out! Get out! You need to get out!
Was the only thing I heard. It is now years later and I still know exactly what that voice sounds like. The voice wasn't like my own voice. It was lower, demanding, and I could hear the fear in the voice. To give you a view of my room at the time, my door was wide open, and it is always wide open because it makes me more comfortable to sleep. But in my dream, there was no door. So if I wanted to escape, I could have gone through the door, but I couldn't see it, as if it was not there. On the opposite side of the door is a window that I barely opened. Back to the story. I stood up in panic, knowing that I had to leave the room no matter what.
You need to leave. Hurry! You need to get out!
were the only thoughts that rushed through my head as I was frantically touching the walls for an exit. I remember the feeling of the cold walls in search of a door, but it wasn't me who was doing it. Again, if I wanted to leave, I could have gotten through the door, but it wasn't there. My body turned around like it never had to the opposite side of the room, and now I was touching the mirror. The weird thing is that I couldn't see my own reflection, but I remember touching the cold mirror. My panic was getting worse, as if someone was coming for me, and that is the only way to describe it. Then all of a sudden, I turned to the window. My thoughts changed from "get out" to "you need to jump." I ran to the window and placed my hand through the handle.
You need to jump. Get out and jump.
Are the only thoughts that go through my head. Since I never really opened my window, it is very hard to open, and it makes a loud squeaking noise when it opens. I turn the handle and the window opens, making this loud squeaking noise, so loud that I woke up. There I was, standing there with my hand on the window, ready to jump 2 stories down. I took a step back and tried to process what just happened. But since it was the middle of the night, I just went back to bed, thinking it was just a weird dream. I woke up next morning, shocked. The window was wide open and everything that was on the table by my window was scattered around the room. My mirror and wall were smudged with my handprints. The handprints were all over, and I began to remember the panic I felt during the dream. I ran downstairs to tell my parents what happened. They looked at each other in shock and asked me more about the event. They walked upstairs and see what happened to my room. That day, my dad zipped tight my window shut in case something like that will happen again. Weird things happen and still happened around that house. I currently live in America, so I don't have to deal with it. But when I go back for the holidays, I always have a weird feeling being in my old room. I am happy I woke up from the squeaking noise of the window and that I didn't jump. I think if I didn't wake up, I would have jumped for sure. The voice in my head was so strong and I had no control over my body until I woke up. To this day, my parents and I sometimes bring it up. They try to figure out why it happened or what it was. I personally have no idea what it could have been. The only thing I could think of is that it could have been an angry spirit, but I have no idea. I had just recently started using Tinder a couple of days before this happened. I had honestly just downloaded the app to mess around because I was bored one night. I was on it one night and saw a girl named Ash that lived about 30 or so miles from me. I decided not to pay for the app to get all the features on it, like seeing who like you and being able to message people. But this girl had her Snapchat in her bio, and I thought she looked pretty attractive. And she said she was looking for people to talk to, so I added her on my Snapchat. I ended up going to sleep a little bit later after that. The next day, while I was at work, she added me back. We started talking about casual things like where we went to school, if we had part-time jobs, and stuff like that. This went on for about 3 days until one night I texted her and she didn't respond for a bit. I didn't think much of it. She was probably hanging out with her friends, as she had posted something on her story with her friends and her messing around a few hours earlier. I went back to playing my Xbox in my room, and next thing I know, I see a message from her a couple hours later with nothing but just a period. I kind of just blew it off and sent a question mark. Seconds later, she opened up my message but didn't respond. I waited a couple of minutes before sending hello. She immediately opened it but didn't say anything. I tried again and sent "What's up?" in the chat. Again, she immediately opened it but didn't respond. By this time, it was around midnight, and I thought maybe she was tired and just didn't want to have a conversation, so I didn't think that much about it. It was a little upsetting though. About 10 minutes later, my phone went off again. I saw it was Ash and she had sent a video to me. I was kind of confused but opened it anyways. What I saw was weird. It was a guy about 20 years old, hitting up a babe about 5 seconds straight. Then he blew it all out of his mouth right at her phone and said in a giggly voice, "She doesn't like you, bro, and I'm going to beat your ass for bothering her." I thought nothing of it, as I knew I obviously had just been pranked. A few minutes later, she sent me another video. I opened it up and it was that guy again. She was recording them in a car and he was cranking up the car. After he cranked it up, he looked at the camera with a grin on his face and said, "We're coming to your house." As I had said earlier, she only lived about 30 minutes from my house, and you could take the highway basically all the way there. A few minutes went by and I checked my snap map. I saw that they were heading south down the highway, straight towards the town I live in. I still didn't believe it though, and didn't think to turn my location off either. About another 20 to 25 minutes went by, and I decided to check my snap map again. This whole time I had been playing my Xbox, and it was kind of in the back of my mind at this point. What I saw when I opened my snap map was horrifying. It was showing Ash's Bitmoji on the street west of me in the same neighborhood. I called a couple of friends but none of them picked up. A couple of minutes later, I got a snap from Ash saying, "Where are you at?" I didn't answer. I just closed the app out. Right after, she sent another message saying the same exact thing. I closed the app out again and turned the lights up in my bedroom. I also turned off my location and lied down in bed. About an hour and a half went by and nothing happened, but I was terrified. I eventually went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I turned my phone back on and checked my Snapchat. I turned my location back on as well, and saw that Ash was back at the town she lived in. I saw she had added a new picture to her story, and I looked at it. She had posted it about 7 hours earlier at about 1:30 in the morning. It was a picture of a street in pure darkness besides street lamps and the caption "Road Trip" with the city's name I live in. I went on a Tinder date with a guy named John. John seems nice, first of all, funny, and we had a few things in common. He asked for my number, so I gave it to him, and he rang me. And because I didn't answer right away, he called me a dickhead. He managed to persuade me to go on a date. We went to a Mexican restaurant where he called me a weirdo for wearing a sombrero and said that wasn't attractive to men. He then refused to take me to the date he had planned, which was mini golfing, and we go to his house to watch a film instead. He assured me nothing would happen because he lives with 7 people and we wouldn't be alone. I very stupidly said yes. He called me a twat for smiling at one of the housemates and told me not to look at anyone when I was with him. He told me he was a supply teacher, which is good because he has a fucking school uniform fetish and thought about having sex with students. I then left very quickly as he started to touch himself in front of me. He also threatened to choke me because he likes it. I also have an issue with my leg and he called me a freak and I should cover up as I'm ugly. I never saw him again. He did text me a few months later asking to be friends because he didn't have any. I fucking wonder why. I also owed him because he paid for dinner even though I insisted we go halves. This happened yesterday. For context, I am a 21-year-old white female in college. I've been on a few dating apps recently. This one centers around plenty of fish. I received some really creepy racially charged messages 2 to 3 days ago from an African American man that essentially fetishized my race and told me that if we got together, we could end racism. Okay, weird, right? That isn't the story but plays into it. I had just finished a long shift at my university work-study position and was walking to my car. I park on the other side of campus, so this is a 10 to 15 minute walk. Less than 5 minutes into my walk, I saw a car stop on the side of the road. The window begins to roll down and, as a woman, I'm immediately nervous. A guy's head pops out and he begins speaking to me, continually asking if I'm on dating sites. I immediately get scared, thinking it may be the same guy who sent me those unsettling messages. He looks similar to the guy's picture. I managed to stutter out that I had no idea what he was talking about and run away. He didn't follow me as he was driving in an area that is a complete dead end. But the creepy part is that I was deduced he had been watching me. He had to have been, as a part of the campus is a dead end, and if he was studying me well enough to recognize my face. Not sure if this encounter is pretty enough, but it sure gave me the creeps. During quarantine, I have been on Tinder, trying to get to know new girls. I got a few matches here and there, but none of them ever really materialized. A few days ago, I matched with a girl. We will call her Bree. We messaged on the app for a while, and she asked for my Snapchat. I decided that would probably be more fun to talk on, so I give it to her. We add each other and she asked if she can come over so we can do things. I politely declined, due to the fact that I just met her, and I'm not full set on looking for that. She seems upset about it and keeps asking to come over. I keep telling her that's not what I'm looking for. She stops sending messages for a while. Eventually, after about 10 minutes, I get a message saying, "I'll be seeing you." I message back saying I don't know what she means. 30 minutes go by and I got a picture from her. It's a street light on a dark road. At this point of time, it's between 12:30 to 1 in the morning and I'm wondering what she's doing out. I ask her what she's doing and I get another picture. This time, it's a picture of a baseball diamond in the dark. I look at it for a second wondering why it looks familiar. Then I realize It's familiar because it's a diamond that is across the street from my house. I message her back, tell her to stop. She opens it, starts to type, then stops. A few minutes pass and I start to think she's gone. I look out my window to see if she's still across the street. I see the dark outline of what appears to be three people standing around the car. While looking through my blinds, a light flashes on me, and I hear someone in the group yell, "There he is!" I close my blinds and curtain and check the lock on my doors. I start to hear knocking on my front door. This is followed by a woman's voice yelling, "Let me in!" I call the police and ask for them to send a car my way. I live in a small town, so we do not have many police officers. The station tells me that the police just dealt with a previous call and should do a drive-by in a few minutes. I yell at the door saying I called the police. About a minute later, I hear the squeal of tires. I look out my window and the car is gone. The police pull in my driveway and come to the door and talk to me, saying they don't see anything. I tell them what happened, but I don't really have any proof that they were there. I think the police were coming and then they take off. I check all the doors and windows in my house before going to my room. I look at my Snapchat and try to figure out how she found me. I look at my Snap map and realize that it somehow turned back on after I turned my location off. I deactivated it again and go back to sleep. She messaged me the next day that she hopes she can see me again, and she hopes that the next meeting goes better. Following the message, I blocked her and reported her on Tinder. This was 3 days ago. If anything else happens, I will post an update. I hope this is a lesson for anyone that uses location on Snapchat. It is very dangerous. I am in my mid-20s and a single mother, so I decided to try out some dating sites. I start talking with this guy on one of the sites. We seem to have a lot in common and he seems pretty normal. I decided to give him my phone number. We continued chatting via text and phone calls. Well, I suggested we get some coffee to meet up. He states he doesn't drink coffee. I suggested some drinks at a bar. He doesn't drink alcohol. Well, he has a great idea. Let's go for a hike. I reluctantly agreed. He wants to go to this place called Busto in South Jersey, which is a historic village with old abandoned buildings, hiking trails, and the home of the Jersey Devil. Great place for a first date. So I suggest we meet in the main parking lot. But no, he has a better idea. Let's meet at a train station nearby. And he'll drive us over because he knows another entrance with better hiking trails. I again reluctantly agreed, not wanting to be rude. So the day of the date comes and for whatever dumb reason, I didn't tell anyone I'm doing this. I think I was embarrassed I was using a dating site, and I knew somewhere in the back of my mind my friends would have tried to talk me out of it. So I pulled into the train station and he's there, in a late 90s Bronco. Not so bad, we can't all afford newer cars. He gets out and he's actually the guy from the pictures. Internal sigh of relief. We get in a car and start to head to the secret hiking trail entrance. We have a nice conversation on the way there. All seems good. We get there and as we were getting out of the car, I go to grab my phone. He says, "Oh no, just leave it here. I have mine." Red flags are waving in my fucking face. Again, being polite and not wanting to argue, I comply. I see the entrances. One directs you towards the village and humanity, so I naturally suggest that one. He says no, and points to this other trail that goes God knows where. And I again, being the good girl that I am, said okay. Right before we go to set off, a bit of rebellion sets in. And I'm like, you know what? I should really have my phone with me. He starts to argue and I'm like, no, I need it, in case the babysitter calls my son. He gives in and unlocks his car, and I grab my phone. We set off down this trail side by side. We are talking and everything seems okay. I started to think that maybe I was just overreacting before and everything is good. Well, we get to a part in the trail where you can only go one by one. So I say you go first and I'll follow. He says, oh no, you go. So in case you trip or anything, I can grab you. I do that nervous giggle thing and politely decline, saying how bad I am with following paths. He then insists I go first in a stern voice. I stupidly complied. The trails are getting narrower by the second, and the woods are getting dark because of the amount of trees and bushes. We are no longer talking, and the only sounds are the crunching of our footsteps. The panic starts setting in. I look back at him, and he's just got this scowl on his face and a dead look in his eyes. I try to smile at him, but nothing. So I stop, and I say, you know what? Let's turn back. I like it better when we could walk next to each other and talk. I said, still being polite. He says he wants to keep going this way. So I say no, I really want to go back the other way. And I start to do just that. As I go to walk past him, he grabs my arm and blocks my path. I just casually grab my phone out of my pocket. Without saying anything, he lets me go, saying, whatever. And we walk back towards the car in silence, me with my phone in my hand the whole time. I amazingly did have signal. As we reach the clearing where the cars are parked, he looks at his watch and states he has to go now. He has somewhere to be. We were only on this date for less than an hour, but okay, I'm not complaining. For whatever dumb reason, I get back in his car. We drive in almost near silence the entire way back to my car. Me with a dead grip on my phone and him looking miserable. He wraps me up at my car and speeds away. I never hear from him again. In my naivety, I want to believe there was no chemistry between us, but let's be honest. When I decided to fuck politeness and grab my phone that day, I spoiled these dastardly plans. Hello. I would like to share the story of when my arm got broken in an attack started by Tinder. I am a 20-year-old woman and 4 years ago, at the age of 16, I was using Tinder. I faked my age, saying I was 18 plus to not get declined. I was a bored teenager with little to no friends, and I wanted to be weird and talk to people. I swiped right on a few random people and had normal conversations. The third person I swiped right on, an hour after the fact, messaged me a normal hello. Since I don't want to call out names, we will call him Austin. Austin and I had a nice bond. We were both supposedly bored teenagers and we had a lot in common. We told jokes to each other and just had a great time. About a month later, he started actually flirting with me. And I mean hardcore flirting. He was saying things like, can't wait to see your nudes. Kinda weirded me out, but I laughed it up and played along. He then asked for my number. And here is when things began getting out of line. He texted me a ton of inappropriate things. Things that would get you banned on Tinder. I asked him what the hell this stuff was for and he just said, I'm just kidding. I know it may suck to hear, but for the next few weeks, everything was fine. It was as if we were acting normal to get it out of my brain. Then he asked me if we could meet up. Being the ignorant teen I was, I accepted, and we met up. He asked me to meet up with him at a dead park at midnight, and so nobody knows we snuck out of the house. I was stupid, so I still agreed. When I got there, I saw a white van. It gave me weird vibes, and since I didn't see Austin anywhere, I was contemplating leaving. Just when I started taking steps back and going back home, A 27-year-oldish looking man started chasing me. I nearly crapped my pants. I tried to run away, but he had stone hard glove thingies on and punched me right below my messy bun. I started bleeding back there and fell over. The guy grabbed me, but I still tried to fight. I kicked him, which was a mistake because he dropped me and started stomping on my arm. I had cuts and scars all over my arm, and at this point, I was screaming. The guy ran away back to his van because he had heard police sirens. It turns out that one of the neighbors called the police because she heard my screaming. I was rushed to the hospital. It was a week before I was recovered enough to go home. I used my non-broken arm to delete Tinder and I never plan on using it again. Still to this day, I wonder about what would happen to me that night if the neighbor had never called the police. I am glad she did. Hi there, so my Tinder story for you to narrate is from a delightful dude called Ali from East London. We were messaging for a few days and he started off as really nice. Then within a few days, he turned into the worst kind of creep apologies. I have certain boundaries as I was sexually assaulted at the age of 17, so it takes a lot for me to trust someone to engage in any sort of relationship, let alone to sleep with them. I was very honest from the start and said no, I'm not interested in random hookups due to a traumatic past event. He certainly showed himself up to be the grade A douche he really is. While I was at work, a job you're not able to have your phone with you due to looking after vulnerable people, I had 45 abusive messages from him. Not normal behavior at all. I wish I had kept them, but I didn't want screenshots of something so toxic. They started out as your typical low-level abusive messages, such as calling me an ugly slut, a nasty trash bitch, the usual. Then on about message 20, it progressed on to more harsh things such as saying I deserve to be assaulted as I was probably some frigid bitch that was leading the dude on, to messages as if he ever finds me, he'll do the same. I literally do not get the logic. First I was a slut, then a frigid bitch. I do not know how you can be both. I wish him luck in finding me, as I am not the meek little 17 years old I once was. I am in my 30s now, and I would literally end him on the spot if he was successful in finding me. I was in Tinder for the whole week before I deleted it, and never bothered with it again. I have now been in a happy relationship for 2 years with my best friend of 17 years. A smart choice on my part, I believe. So I feel this story belongs here because I don't know if he was just mentally disturbed and kidding, or if he was actually malicious and failed. I was maybe 16 years old and I was kind of a rebellious kid. I joined Tinder to meet some older guys and I matched with this really attractive 20-year-old that seemed really into me. Naive, I know. Anyway, he asked to pick me up from school the following day to get ice cream and walk around a nearby lake. I said yes. He picked me up and we had a great conversation. Nothing weird, and it seems like really enjoyed each other's company. When we got to the lake, no one was there because it was the middle of October and cold on water. We walked about halfway around the lake and that's when it got weird. He started talking to me about crime documentaries and how he'd studied them, and he knew how to kill someone without getting caught. He started making tracks in the mud and said he would want to wear 2 big shoes so the police couldn't match him on shoe size. He picked up his shoe to show me a size of 10.5 and informed me that he wore an 8. I got uneasy. He was strolling around me while I was sitting on the bench like I was prey. He went to one of those dog baggy dispensers and pulled one up. He shaded it up to his elbow and started swatting it on my face. I thought he might be trying to gross me out, so I was half giggling and swatting it away. On one of my swats, he grabbed my forearm and pulled me in, and then put the bag over my head. Still, I thought he might be kidding, but as I tried to get away, I noticed that he wasn't letting up. I was starting to panic now, realizing I wasn't getting any air. He picked me up in a sort of a headlock position. I was kicking and trying to elbow, and I guess one of those elbows connected to his groin, and we both fell to the ground. He laughed and said, "You've got more fight in you than I thought you did. Was just gonna make you pass out, but I didn't even get that far. I'm proud of you." All of my stuff, phone, taser, was in his car on the other side of the lake, so I decided to play along and pretended that it was funny. I told him I needed my inhaler now and to walk me back. He did, surprisingly. I got in his car and grabbed my taser and my phone out. While he walked around the back of the car to his driver's side, I texted my mom SOS to track my location. When I looked up from my phone, I noticed the guy had pulled out a pocket knife. He slowly laid the tip into my chest, just enough for it to almost pierce my skin. He just blankly stared at me, and this went on for about 30 full seconds. I don't know why, but I said, "You're not going to do it." This seemed to snap him out of it, and he paused, and then hysterically laughed. Between laughs, he let out "That's the second time I could have killed you today." The whole drive home, he proceeded to tell me how he would have raped and mutilated my body if I had accidentally died that day. I got home and bolted out of his car. As soon as I did, he sped up. I got a dick pic later that night, and then he blocked me. I looked him up, and it turns out he was actually 27 years old and had a criminal record for domestic violence. That's all I could get of him though. I reported it to the police, but nothing came of it though. Probably because I wasn't willing to tell my parents what happened. Either way, worst encounter of my life.